So I joined some support discords for LGBT plus like trans communities were in them. So I joined them. They were like the only ones for the most part that were not for teenagers only. So if anyone wants to start a discord for, basically for trans people, that's not for teenagers. But I joined not as questioning, I joined as FDM, and I was really proud of myself for that. Um, and I've been telling everyone I'm Big Brother, and I'm not supposed to be like a mentory type, but at the same time, whatever, it's my nature. And my therapist was like, you should make mutual friendships and not just take care of everyone, kind of a thing. I'm trying. Um, I also have a trans friend who invited me to their actual trans support group. They just have to ask the leader. So I might actually be going to a real one. Well, okay, on Zoom because, you know, right now the coronavirus COVID-19 issues is going on, but still, it's been like 6 days since I last recorded because I wasn't home. My polyamorous relationship is long distance with our girlfriend, and I have to drive her 3.5 hours back to her place to pick up packages and to check her mail, and we stay there for a couple of days before we come back here again. So it's like, um, you know, louder there. Um, she has 3 roommates and stuff, and so I didn't feel comfortable recording there. And her room's really small, 'cause she's, finishing her last year of college, hopefully, soon. Um, I couldn't help but mentor it. At first, I was only doing it in one, and it's not mentoring as much as honestly it was in the first one, in the first support group. It was more moderating. Like someone, for instance, posted this picture, and it was like, oh, you know, your relationship, if it's consensual love, is valid. And it was like these little anime people, and there was like a lesbian relationship and a gay relationship and a straight relationship that said even if you're trans. And first person's like, oh, I relate to I'm the person with the black hair. And then the second comment is, notice there's no bi representation once again. We're excluded from the community. And it was this like, really? So I had to explain to this person that it's okay to celebrate someone specific and not everyone at the exact same time. It is okay for something to, for a few seconds, not be about you. And I did that while at the same time recognizing that bi, pan, asexual, a whole bunch of groups don't get as much representation. But just because it didn't include you doesn't mean that it's intentionally excluding you. It does suck that there are some things that just don't get as much representation as they should, but a positivity channel that's all about trying to validate people and make people feel good is not the place to start that discussion, especially when you basically are reacting as if someone intentionally slighted the entire bi community by drawing some little anime people. Um, it was an overreaction to something that didn't apply to them. And of course, like 50 people all were like, oh, yes, here, here, arrows pointing up at my statement, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I said it nicer than this, but seriously, yes, absolutely. My spouse is an asexual, And pretty much the only asexual representation there is either that they are like soulless, emotionless, whatever's, like no feelings, no nothing, or else that they are like not real and that it turns out that they weren't really asexual. And it's like, that's not right. But at the same time, if she sees like some cute love story between like two lesbians, she's not going to be like, where's the asexuals? Because that's not what it's about. It's okay to be supportive of other people, even when you also at the same time wish that there was more representation of you. They're both completely okay. Now, if there's a little anime people thing that says all relationships are valid except bi or except pan or whatever it is, at that point I am going to stand on a soapbox and defend you because that's not okay. But it wasn't intentionally excluding anyone. I wanted to record sooner than this because there's been so much on my mind. I've been considering coming out to my family like really hard. I found another video that I might show to my dad instead that's got a conservative guy in it, and honestly, yesterday for D&D I almost came out to my brother again. I've come out to most of my friends at this point. There's only a couple of them I haven't come out to. And they've all been supportive and all sworn they wouldn't tell my family, so it's just I've noticed that a lot of the trans community has always been very defensive. Like very defensive about coming out, and then people rejecting them and it hurts, so they just cut them off. And I'm trying not to do that. There was actually someone in one of the trans communities who was like, I came out to one of my friends, they seemed accepting, but then when we were with a group of friends, they didn't like defend me or stand up to any of the friends who were like totally joking and saying slurs and stuff about trans people. And I was like, okay. And he was like, I don't think any of my friends are going to be my friends in the future. I was like, okay, you can take that stance. Or they're boys. You're all teenagers. So it could be that they literally grew up with terrible locker room talk and never thought about any of it at all. Because I have known quite a few men that happened to. They just grew up being surrounded by guys who said this shit, and it never occurred to them to think about, oh, especially when you're a teenager. So I said, what next time you're in your group of friends, say, hey, I know someone who's trans. Actually, I'm related to them. And they were like, everyone in the entire group was like, oh my god, that's genius. Oh my god, where did you come up with that? And I'm like, is it? Um, I'm sure I am not the first person to have ever suggested that. I don't know. I didn't think that was like universally clever. But anyway, and they were like, it's not even lying. It's technically true. And I was like, I don't know. Anyway, the point is he said, okay, I guess I'll try that and see what happens. And I said, yeah, if they're like apologetic and it makes them think about the shit spewing out their mouth for the first time in their lives, you did a good thing. And if they're not apologetic, then you know for sure. But don't immediately write them off before even giving them the opportunity to prove whether they're a person of character. That's my stance on it. And I realize some people have been so hurt that they just can't take being hurt again. It's easier for them to avoid the entire situation by just immediately cutting someone off. And there's this wall there. And that's why I say a lot of trans people I meet are very defensive in regards to acceptance. But I don't know. I'm trying not to be that. I'm trying to be a middle ground. I I've thought about a lot of things, and I feel like I've made some breakthroughs by myself. So I feel like if I'm making breakthroughs by myself, this might be better if I, instead of doing therapy every 2 weeks, if I ask if we can do it once a week while I'm trying to have breakthroughs and trying to figure stuff out. So I pulled out all my pictures and journals and my school stuff and everything. Well, I'm thinking about pulling out all my art that I drew. I have pieces of art since I was like 3 years old, um, because most of my growing up years, everyone considered me quite the artist. I even had a personal art tutor for a while who did it unpaid because she was so inspired by what I did, but she ended up getting frustrated. And I realized why in my memory, but I want to pull out my art and look. But if I remember correctly, I would draw two types of art style. And one was very hard lines, that was more anime-y looking, very cutesy and sweet-natured, and what I thought people liked, because people usually liked it, and it was more girly. And then I drew, sometimes I would just get in this mode where I was just being, by myself and passionately into what I was doing, and it was messier, and I would draw with these rough lines, and it was more just like hard sketching. And honestly, I realized that I still have the piece of art that inspired her to want to tutor me, and it is very masculine, if I remember correctly. And I wonder if literally I had two different ways of drawing, so I intend to pull it all out and see what I see. But it's also been a little hard because I still feel guilty about playing less like video games with the girls and stuff. Figuring all this shit out takes time and energy, and sometimes I'm so like exhausted just from like the emotional gurgitation of dealing with all this crap. I I found a song. It's by Warble, and it's called "The Village," and it's basically like my anthem right now, my mantra. It's like it's a very very simplistic look into my life, but at the same time, it's like it hits home. It's very hard hitting. So, The Village. Go watch it on YouTube. Yeah. Anyway, I've had some breakthroughs. Um, I had a lot of complicated feelings about being a man when I have such negative views of men, and I am a person of character to the best of my ability. I try really hard to be a good person, and I realized somewhere that I already am a good man. I used to tell myself that, if I ever had kids of my own, which I would never birth, but, say that the girls wanted a kid or something, or we adopted or whatever. Um, I know automatically that I would be a better parent than my parents simply because I would never do anything illegal to a child. And that automatically means I would do a better job. Even if I'm still gonna fuck it up some way, and not do something right, because that's what happens, at least I would do better. And I realize that's the same thing true of men. All of the men that I view as like predatory and as bad men, to be better than them, all I need to do is not do anything illegal. And that's not difficult for me. I'm not sure why it's difficult for them. I, uh, I'm not a bad man already. Even without a single drop of tea, without a single surgery, I'm still a better man. I try to build women up, I don't hurt them. I try to give children safe space, I don't hurt them. I am not cruel to animals. I actually pick up litter sometimes. I don't litter. I turn the lights off when I'm not in a room. I try to always use all of my food as much as possible, not create waste, try to help the planet. And maybe it's in small ways, and I realize that the majority of what's wrong with the planet is due to, you know, corporations, and it's not my fault, but I still try to help. When I was a little kid, for like earth conservation, I used to actually walk up to trees and breathe into the bottom of the leaves, trying to give them extra carbon dioxide to filter so that they could use it to for fuel, because I thought that that would make the trees happy. I was a better boy than some of the boys I grew up around. Never tried to catch any little girls and push them against a fence and make them do things. Never been a bully. For the most of my life, I've been always trying to be good. And I think that makes me a person of character. And yeah, I get it wrong sometimes. I am not perfect. But I am a good man. I also had a breakthrough about losing lesbianness. I've been struggling with letting go of lesbian culture and letting go of how much being a lesbian has given to me, and the acceptance and the support. And I've realized a couple things about the lesbianness. First of all, when I was young and I liked boy things and I liked girls, everyone would call me a sinner and call me a lesbian. No one, not a single person ever suggested that, well, maybe I'm doing this because I'm trans. It was always, you're a lesbian, you need to go pray for your soul. And so it was just sort of, when I grew up, first thing I did was come out as a lesbian. I didn't even know that trans men could exist until I was in my early 20s somewhere. And by that point, I was desperately, excuse me, excuse me. Sorry, I cough like that. I've never smoked a day in my life, but I have lung issues because I had pneumonia several times when I was a kid, and apparently have scar tissue in my lungs. So I have a very deep, growly cough. Anyway, I was desperate for lesbian approval. I was trying so hard to fit in with the lesbians. I was trying so hard to be a lesbian and learn all about the lesbians, and have a girlfriend and everything. So I was like full blown, like, felt like, oh, I was finding something here. And it wasn't that I was finding myself, but at least I was finding a place where I didn't feel terrible all the time. And so it didn't occur to me, oh, I could be that. And that sounds strange, I'm sure, but it just didn't even occur to me that it was possible. And I don't know if it's just because of my family or how I grew up or what, but it genuinely did not occur to me that this trans guy I'm seeing right here, I could be that. And I remember being interested in them as people. Like, I was interested in, well, you look kind of feminine, but you have a beard. But I didn't want to ask and be offensive. And I was like curious, but I didn't want to be hurtful because I'm always trying to be a good person. It's bane of my everything. So I'm always trying to be a good person. Anyway, as I started getting more and more involved and doing volunteering and things like that, it started to become more apparent that it was a thing that people did. But I did not realize that bottom surgery was a possibility. Basically, when I realized that bottom surgery was a real possibility, was literally like when I started having this crisis right here. Ah! Because I have always had a phantom penis. And every time I have sex, I can feel it. And feel it like a guy. And I just thought that's what lesbians did, and apparently that's not very lesbian at all. And the rest of the time I completely dissociate from genitalia. Sex has been better with me imagining myself transitioned, which is exciting. Definitely better. Instead of just pretending I'm some. I'm sorry, dysphoria is still a very hard thing for me to talk about. I still feel like even if the worst case scenario happened, it would be worth it. When I was little, I had issues about my genitalia, and it never once occurred to me that the reason I was mean to my younger brothers had anything to do with that. It was first suggested to me like pretty much a week ago, and I've thought about it a lot because the thing is everyone's always written it off as I was in an abusive situation, so I thought abuse was the proper expression, and I've always felt really bad about how I treated my brothers. I was not a good big sister. And I can recognize that while also recognizing that I did a lot of things that needed to be done in order for us to survive and to be okay. And we weren't great, but I was also a child doing my best, and somehow my best worked out. So But I did do terrible things to my brothers. And, um, especially when I was really little. The older I got, the less that happened. Um, like, I think the last major bad thing I did was when I was around 12. And then I just didn't do that to them anymore. Um, used to pick on them, used to intentionally get them in trouble so they'd get beat. I would laugh at them while they got hurt. I did would physically harm them. I was not a good sister. But I was also tiny. I mean, I started doing this when I was a toddler. And around 5 and 6, I started forcing them to wear dresses. My thing is I didn't know why I was doing it. I've never once thought to myself, well, why are you doing this? And if I was intentionally emasculating them, I'm really even more deeply sorry than I already am. And I mean, they've forgiven me. One of them doesn't even remember. And the other one, once he became an adult and stuff, he forgave me for the most part, I think. But I always had to be jealous of them. If I wanted to play with boy toys, I had to go sneak playing with their stuff. Their Hot Wheel cars, their Jurassic Park dinosaur figures, their Star Wars figures, all their stuff. I was constantly digging through their toys and playing in the room, and I could see how that'd be annoying, having your sister constantly tearing into your stuff. I remember when I got my first Legos and I didn't need to play with their Legos all the time. I dedicated an entire shelf of my dresser to them Legos, and made little islands, little pirate islands for it, and that was my Legos. And then I got knight in shining armor ones with a little like wizard who had like a beard and a glow in the dark wand, and I was so excited because I loved knights in shining armor. And my mother, seeing me play with Legos, of course got me a girl set with like a little pink house and flowers, and they had a pool and a little pink car. And it was little girl Legos. So I made the little girl Legos, the wenches for my pirates, or the damsel in distress for my knight in shining armor, tore the entire thing apart, turned it into a tropical island with an oasis on it of fresh water so that they could survive. When I played with dolls and Barbies, they were always on an adventure or rock climbing or digging in caves, or else they were on deserted islands and they were trying to survive. And I never played games that I see other girls play, like go to the mall, or, you know, like let's dress up, or oh, let's make a wedding, or like I wasn't into that. My dolls and Barbies, they were like they were girls who were very masculine, I guess. I don't know. They didn't want to do girly things. And I realized I've written over 50 books in my life. I've never published but 3 of them, and all of my main characters for the most like part period are guys or very masculine women, and every once in a while it's a child or an animal, but for the most part it's either from the perspective of a guy or a woman who's not very womanly. And it never occurred to me in my entire life. I started writing when I was a child, and I started actually writing novels when I was 16, and it never once occurred to me to wonder why I did that or to think about it in any way, shape, or form. Like, it just was what I did. Um, I write about lesbians, but I always write from the perspective of the butch lesbian if I write about lesbians. I never write from the perspective of a femme lesbian because I don't understand femme lesbians because they're so girly. I love them. They're beautiful. They're awesome. But I don't want to ever be one. I just I was allowed to like Star Trek because it was seen that that was something to be done, but I wasn't allowed to like other boyish stuff. The only things I was allowed to like that were boyish were things that my mother literally saw another girl liking it too. And it never occurred to me to get a girl to pretend to play with something like that to make her feel like it was okay. Unfortunately, I wasn't that devious. It wasn't okay. I remember she made me take sewing lessons from these wonderful little elderly women, and I loved the elderly women. They were great. I did not like the sewing, and of course, I had to make a dress. My very first thing I ever sewed was a dress with flowers for the pattern on the cloth, and when I finished the dress, I didn't feel comfortable in it, but whatever. And then my mother's like, you have to wear it to church on Sunday. I was like, oh gosh. First time I ever wore it. Didn't even get out of the house. I tore it on the door handle so I wouldn't have to wear the dress. Didn't want to wear it. She was like, oh, that can be fixed. And I was like, mm-hmm. And I hid it away and hoped I would never have to fix it. And anytime she asked about it, I'd be like, oh, my poor dress. I did not want to wear it. Every Sunday I had to wear a dress. Hated wearing dresses. One time, someone I really admired complimented a dress I was in. I was just like, I just threw this on. Thanks. And she was like, well, that's not a nice way to say thank you. You know, you need to learn how to take a compliment. And I was just like, I don't want to be complimented for wearing this dress. But I couldn't say that. I couldn't even comprehend that that's what I was trying to say because I was so very much avoiding my own self because everyone was trying to convert me out of being gay. Like, pray the gay away does not work. All it does is make a person insanely suicidal. I helped one of my friends make some new friends from these little Discord trans groups I joined. There was these two girls who were from the same area, so and my friend was like, "Oh, I want to make new friends, but it's freaking coronavirus and we have to all stay indoors." So I introduced them, tried to do a good thing. I feel a lot better about being afraid of testosterone because my friend who invited me to go to the support group also told me that, you know, I could go on gel or cream or something, and he has non-binary friends who do that, and the testosterone changes are significantly slower. Or even go on like, you know, zero point 0.5 of a dose or something like that, you know, just have much slower gradual changes on the T so that if only bad things are occurring, you can stop, or if positive things are occurring, you can up your dose. And it's actually very manageable. so I feel a lot less intimidated by the Pandora's box of testosterone because I can start slow. And starting slow is much more comfortable for me. He also helped me with the lesbian thing because he was so funny. I was like, it's hard for me to give up the lesbian stuff. So he's like, okay, well, then you can just be a transmasculine man who also biologically is a butch lesbian. And I'm just like, and he's like, no, no, we can make this really, really long, you know? And I'm just like, no, that's just a straight guy. And he's like, no, no, no. So he keeps adding more and more definitions. And it's just like, nope, that still is literally describing a straight guy. Like, it was funny.